Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. 5 years ago, Pennsylvania State Fire Commissioner Ed Mann told a House committee, sooner or later, somebody's going to dial 911, the 911 center is going to dispatch a fire department, and nobody's going to show up. Now, Representative Matt Gabler was not a member of the House Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee at that time, but he is now, and the committee recently passed a package of legislation designed to address the problems faced by our emergency responders. Representative, it's been 5 years, but we're moving in that direction. In a way, he was right. How do you react to that?
So it's something that I hear about every day as I talk to constituents in Elk and Clearfield counties. There is a concern that our emergency services are facing a crisis. We're facing a crisis of manpower, we're facing a crisis of time, we're facing a crisis of resources. And I had specifically requested now in my 6th term in the General Assembly to join the House Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee for just this reason. I think it is so important that we start getting down to the brass tacks on solutions, and I'm very happy to see that we've got a report we can go on. We'll be talking about that report, but now we can move forward with legislation. And there's no silver bullet, but there are things we can do to make the system better in our Commonwealth so that we can preserve our volunteer fire departments, we can preserve our EMS system, we can make life better for our first responders, which is going to make life better in our communities. Yeah,
the word crisis tends to be used a lot, but the problem here obviously is if that comes to fruition, it's a real crisis if nobody shows up.
Well,
how serious is the problem?
Well, and let's face it, life in a community is only made possible by our ability to be resilient and respond to disaster, to emergency. And so if we see the volunteer fire service go away, if we see the continued closure of EMS services, which we've lost a lot of ambulance services across the state, if we see this trend continue and don't do something to reverse it, I don't mean to overstate it, but civilized society is placed at risk. And so we have to start getting solutions going, and we have some solutions that we're ready to start with. We've taken the first step, but we've got a lot more work to do.
Before we talk about the package, this isn't a problem that's strictly about money. It's not about selling more chicken or more subs. It's more than dollars and cents, right?
Absolutely. I mean, money is certainly a concern, but as the old saying goes, time is money, and we're to the point now where really we're facing a crisis of human capital. We're relying more on our volunteers than we ever have. We're putting more responsibility on our volunteers than we ever have, to include training requirements, to include fundraising requirements, to include what it takes just to administratively run a volunteer fire company or an EMS service, and so really time is money, and what we're expecting of our volunteers has gotten to a point where people also have families, they have jobs, they have other things they need to do, and so first thing we need to do is come to the table with solutions that is going to make it easier for volunteers to serve their community and also have a quality of life that goes along with it.
The package of bills is largely a product of Senate Resolution 6. Could you talk a little bit about what, as they call it, SR6 is?
So this is the report I referred to earlier in our interview, and it's so important that we have this opportunity. And this goes back over a decade, where there was a first report that was done in the early 2000s called SR60, and there were recommendations that came out of that, and the General Assembly adopted some. But as time went on, those recommendations were feared to be stale or old, and so there was really an update was needed. And so SR6 was passed in, I believe, 2017, and it called for a commission to come together across the state in 2018. And in late 2018, the SR6 report was published. That is a report that actually there are copies available at my district offices, so people are welcome to pick up copies of that report, review it for themselves. And now it's on us as a General Assembly to look at the recommendations of that report and determine what we can do to move forward to assist our first responders and our EMS system, our volunteer fire companies across the state, and take those recommendations and turn them into action. That's why I want to be a member of this committee this session, because now is when we're taking those ideas and springing into action.
You've authored one of the bills in the package. Can you talk a little bit about that and just the package in general?
So the package, earlier this week we passed a package of bills out of the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee that takes the first step towards implementing these recommendations. And some of them deal with money, some of them deal with time. We've got two bills that I think specifically deal with the ability of an emergency service to recover costs when they show up to help. We've got a bill that allows volunteer fire departments to bill when somebody is at fault in an accident and the volunteer fire department had to respond to that accident and consume some of their materials that they had to sell chicken dinners for or host a bingo for. Things as simple as the kitty litter, the oil dry that's put on the pavement to clean up and keep our communities and our waterways safe. So that's a bill that I think would just make common sense. We also have a bill that would make it easier for our ambulance services to recover the costs that they're not being reimbursed for through our health insurance system. And that's House Bill 1347. So that's a bill that is definitely needed. Recently, in the last few years, Act 84 was passed that took a step down that path, but our ambulance services are telling us it wasn't enough. So we want to take another step and move forward. But we also have some legislation that deals with helping with time, and this is something that I think is so important. The biggest thing that I'm hearing from my volunteers and from my chiefs is that with what it takes to train a volunteer firefighter, by the time they've gotten through the training that it takes to get them up to speed and ready to go, they've already lost all their family time, they've already traveled, they've already spent their own money, they've lost their weekends for a long period of time to get through the hundreds of hours that it takes. And so one of the things that we moved was a bill that will make it easier for the fire commissioner's office to take some of that training and put it online. Now, to train a volunteer firefighter, part of the issue is classroom training, and part of it is hands-on. So what we want to do is we want to take that classroom training that people are currently getting in their car and driving miles, dozens of miles, to go find a spot on a weekend and take hours of training and then turn around and drive home. Empower them to be able to do that at their own convenience on a Tuesday evening at comfort of their own living room. Get that training put online so when they are getting in the car and driving to a training site is to put their hands on equipment and actually get a feel for what it is to be a firefighter so that then they can get back into their community and assist, and they're spending their time in that way rather than driving to another classroom. So there's a wide package of bills here, and then I was honored to be able to offer my own piece of legislation, which is something that I've worked in consultation with the folks on the SR6 Commission, and to provide an incentive for volunteers that get involved in their fire departments. And what my bill is a bill that extends to school districts the ability to make an incentive to first responders to
the option, as you wanted to point out. Yeah,
absolutely, it is an option. So currently we allow municipalities across the state to give a credit on municipal taxes to volunteer first responders who are active in their community. And this would extend that same option to school districts. And this is a really neat tool because typically a school district tax bill is larger than a municipal tax bill. So it would allow that incentive to be even greater. So it is something that I think that some school districts across the state will be very interested in because they see the value in having the volunteers that serve their community and strengthen their school district as well.
Finally, I'll give you a chance to plug the people who, I mean, there are full-time responders, but we're talking volunteers who take their own time to do this because it's a chance for them to give back. And we're talking about some really wonderful people that engage in this.
These are the core of our communities, and we've seen this. These are the people that make our communities tick, and we've seen this for generations. And the people that are at the core of our fire departments, they're our community leaders, and they are continuing to do it. But we have continued to put more and more burden on them, and we need to start turning the tide. We need to start bringing the resources to bear to make their lives easier. We know they're going to continue to give, and they continue to give till it hurts. So let's bring the resources around, and remember that our volunteer fire departments are giving a service that if we had to pay every nickel and cent out of our tax dollars for what they do, we would never be able to afford it. Our communities would be bankrupt. So to bring some resources to the table to make them viable is the least we can do, and in the end it is actually an investment that makes sense and saves us money in the long run. So I'm glad to be part of this. It's the first step of a process, but we've got a lot of work left to do, but I'm glad to be part of it.
If you have questions about this or any legislative issue, we'll show you Representative Gabler's contact information in a few seconds. I'm Scott Little, and this has been Legislative Report.